Good Saturday afternoon, YouTube. This is Tired Metalhead Weatherman. I hope you guys are doing well. I'm enjoying a very quiet weekend. Hopefully, you guys are doing the same. But of course, we're getting towards the second half of the month. So I guess you could call this the part two of the February outlook. And we may even make a little sneak peek towards March. Also, another quick update, and look for this video very soon, probably even tomorrow morning. The March outlook is in, so we will be touching on that a little bit later down the road. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's down the line for this half of the month and really also this week. So this weekend's going to be quiet, as I mentioned earlier, but right around the midweek, we're looking at things becoming active once again, as we have it now a day 5 slight risk across the Ozarks particularly. This mainly looks like a linear threat, and I'm going to briefly touch on it in this video, but there will be a video tomorrow afternoon that discusses the parameters with this. There is still a tornado threat that exists with this as of right now, but I'm trying to wait a little bit longer to touch on it just to get a better idea of some of the parameters. But from what I'm seeing now, it looks like all hazards are possible, but mainly tornadoes and wind are going to be the greatest threat I have with this. I envision a squall line with this right now. Days 4, 6, 7, and 8 are also predictability too low, so those will also have to be watched very closely. Marginal to slight risk cannot be ruled out with these days, so we'll be keeping an eye on those as well. That being said, let's go ahead and actually look at the models here. We'll start out with the vorticity maps, my favorite one to start out with here. And what we're mainly looking at pretty much are going to be troughs and just little shortwave pieces of energy here. We're looking at the higher levels of the atmosphere, and as you can see here, like I said, not a whole lot going on into the weekend, but watch this little feature that comes into the northwest on Tuesday night. This is going to be causing rain and snow showers across the region here, especially towards the higher elevations. We could get some pretty significant snow possibly. And we'll actually go ahead and look at the details of that a little bit later in the video. But what we end up seeing here is we see this little small piece of energy right here that ends up being pushed out ahead of this main trough that pops up. What ends up happening is, as a result, as this gets flung forward here, stage ends up being set for a severe weather event that's across the Ozarks. You can see, and I've talked about this plenty of times before, if you've been watching the channel for a minute, when these isobars are tight like that, that usually represents stronger upper level forcing. So there could be a nice little hotbed of storms that pops up right here. It's a pretty abundant warm sector just from what I can see on this map alone, without even looking at the temperatures. So between all of those things, right across this sector here, we can see easily that there's some severe weather to be expected. Like I said, I'm mostly expecting a linear type mode because the low is not too far behind where this warm sector is. So the collision air masses is going to be a lot more abundant. The energy around there is going to be stronger. Not to say that any prefrontal cells can be ruled out, but for the most part, I'm leaning more so towards a linear threat. I think the wind profile still does kind of favor tornadoes, but we'll have to see how things play out because given how far out we are, this is more than likely going to change in appearance just a little bit. But that being said, that's what we have going on with that storm system. We'll have to keep an eye on what's to be expected on Thursday. I don't expect much, but the threat isn't zero, clearly, because otherwise there wouldn't be a predictability too low. It would be potential. So we'll keep an eye on that. We see it getting notably warmer as we head later into the week around the 24th. And then we see another big system that could be on its way and causing even more severe weather. Potentially could be even more widespread as we head into Sunday night, Monday morning time frame here. I'm thinking across this sector here, there could be multiple modes of storms possibly, maybe even some tornadic. We'll have to see how this unfolds here. The timing of this system in accordance with the warm sector is going to be a key point because this already kind of has the look of a nocturnal event. given the fact that we're looking at 06C. Again, like I said, this is about 9 days out, so we can't even see this on the National Weather Service or the Storm Prediction Center's radar, so to speak. So, going to be hard to really pick up on this one, but we will be watching it very closely over the coming days. That being said, we're going to go ahead and roll this forward a little bit further, and we'll watch this roll out by the start of the 28th, and the end of the month, the final day, I should say, looks pretty quiet. But the pattern is looking to be pretty active here, so we will be pretty much on storm alert, on storm mode and winter weather alert mode here on the channel. So a lot of content coming your way, so be prepared for that. When we look at this on other models, it's really not too dissimilar. Canadian has a slightly different look to the Euro, but not by much. It's a little bit more robust here, but around the same sort of time frame, the same sort of look with the trough. There is a pocket here where the forcing is a little bit more subtle. We'll have to see what ends up happening over here, and it's, I would say, right about where this line is here between Louisiana and Mississippi here. There could be a little bit of increased activity in this corridor should this hold up. Like I said, we're 5 days out, so a lot can happen with this forecast here. Oops. That being said, we'll move this further along, and what we'll see is a very similar picture. This trough comes in a little bit earlier, or a little bit later actually, excuse me, as we head into the 28th here. So this could be, and you can see there's a little bit of a more robust look to it, and not to mention, I'm seeing also potential for colder temperatures towards the center of this thing. So around the back side of this, we could see a good bit of wintry precipitation right around here, I would say, on the western flank of this. Not the best circle I've drawn, I know, I'm sorry. But that's what we're looking at right now. And that's the end of that model run. And last but not least, of course, the GFS. One thing I like about the setup that we're seeing on the fifth day here is the fact that all the main global operational models are in a pretty good agreement, I would say. Because look, it's pretty similar look. GFS is a little bit more progressive with this system, and that could end up pushing the threat a little further to the east, but we'll have to see what happens. With the GFS run, there could be potential for additional severe weather to pop up here. And maybe Alabama could be in play. So it's a pretty broad area that's been discussed over the last few days amongst the weather community as to where it goes. It could in reality stretch all the way from, I'd say, Tennessee over towards Louisiana, Mississippi, and Arkansas here. We'll have to see how this plays out here, because we still have a little bit of discrepancy, but not nearly as much as the last system. So it's a very good sign, to say the least. So that being said, we'll run this a little further forward, start to get a peek at that next system that's going to be coming in more so towards the end of the month. Trough digs pretty far to the south here, but the GFS actually has this moving a little bit faster than the other two models here. I do see increased potential for another severe event across this sector here from the Tennessee Valley, maybe Kentucky, could be the southeast as well. But again, given how far out we are, this is more or less just hearsay. And as we move towards the 28th, it's pretty calm until we look over towards the northwest, where we have another big storm system coming in, and this will be coming in right around the beginning of March. This is going to bring in some pretty significant cold towards the northern half of the U.S. here, from the looks of it. And there's a pretty abundant warm sector here too, so that's a little bit alarming. I see a pretty deep digging trough here. So pretty much, I would say, anywhere from, I'd say, I'm trying to make sure I have this right, but could be flooding rains here But a little further to the south of there, depending on how this storm system decides to move, we could end up seeing some severe weather as well. So it's going to be tricky. Try to figure this out here. But look, there's quite an abundant warm sector, but not enough forcing yet. But look what happens as we move towards the fourth here. So I'm watching that area for flooding, and then I'm going to watch this area for severe weather as of right now. Over I'd say maybe the third or the fourth. A lot of moving parts with this upcoming system, or potential upcoming system. It hasn't even formed yet, so we have to see what this potential extratropical cyclone even looks like. Gotta love meteorology sometimes. But this also has a very cold side to it, so there could be some wintry weather across the northeast with this. So there's a lot going into that. Then there's a big cool down that could be expected as we head into the first full week of March here. So a lot going on. It's going to be a very interesting time. There's other stuff going on too, with like polar vortex related stuff. And I'm going to go over that a little bit later. Not in this video, but more so with the March forecast. But that's just to show you just what on earth we could be dealing with. March looks like it's going to be a very active month. So let's go ahead and start looking at some of the temperatures we could be seeing over the next few days. I'm going to kind of run these more into a loop mode, so to speak, than anything else. And keep in mind, there's a lot of room for this forecast to be bust wide open. And we'll go ahead and start out by looking at the Euro's temperatures here, which are going to be really interesting. So like I said, the weekend was going to be a little bit chilly for some, but we'll be ending on a good note heading into Monday. By the time we get to Monday afternoon, a large portion of the country is going to be back to or even above average, especially across the southeast where we're getting into those 70s. A few spots around Texas are getting into the 80s. Across the southwest now, we're starting to get into those 60s and 70s as well. Cold air tries to mainly make a push south, but it probably won't get any further south than maybe central Iowa, more or less. Towards the western half of the country, the Rockies are going to be mainly holding in most of that cold. We could see below freezing temperatures on the higher elevations, but over towards Denver, we're dealing with some cold air damming. We're basically going to see the temperature at about 43 degrees there. So I'm guessing the best thing to do there is just make sure you know where your elevation is. Be aware of your location, so that way you don't end up dressing up for the wrong thing. Once we get later into the week, though, that's when that cold air is really going to start to settle in. Some pretty brutally cold temperatures, too, from the looks of it here. Towards the northwest and northern tiers of the Great Plains, we could see some well below zero temperatures getting into the negative teens. Can't rule out a few negative 20s in some isolated spots, especially around Montana and Wyoming. And as we go through the course of the day, those temperatures are going to hold, too. So just make sure that you have everything in working order across these regions. Towards the end of the week, those temperatures are going to be starting to push a little bit more so towards the east, but we're also going to start to lose some of the oomph behind that cold air, so to speak. So over towards the Great Lakes, we could still see some single digits, some 20s, but nothing nearly as bad as what we were seeing out west. And then the cold air starts to make another big push, and this is going to be associated with that bigger trough that we just saw in the vorticity here. So I'm expecting a big cool down to possibly start out the month of March for a large portion of the country here. We'll keep a close eye on that as well. And then when we go over to the Canadian, it's a pretty similar look. We go through the week. It's pretty warm. Warm sector is a little bit more abundant with this look here. We're dealing with 80s even into Alabama, Georgia, parts of Mississippi, maybe even Louisiana too. And then as we get into Friday, temperatures still hold. Wow. That warm sector just does not go away at all, really. So southeast ridge looks like it's somewhat in effect here, but it's not going to be enough to really ward off any sort of wet weather. So It's going to be active across this region. I expect a lot of showers and storms to be going through as each of those frontal systems that will end up forming as a result of those troughs go through the area. We go to the GFS, and I haven't even set this one up yet. We're going to be looking at a pretty similar situation starting out, but this is where things will start to get interesting, especially since we can also look further out. Monday, like I said, similar look, and then as we get into Wednesday and Thursday, it's pretty similar, even across the southeast, still looking at 80s. But that cold front looks like it actually gets here this time instead of it kind of lingering a little further to the north. So we look towards the next weekend. It looks like it gets pretty cold for a moment, but just as quickly as it gets cold, it warms back up. And this kind of sets the stage for a much more abundant warm sector to develop and maybe a bigger severe potential. We'll have to see what ends up happening with that. You can see the next front almost being indicated right here after the fact by that Monday morning. And then here comes that rapid cool down. I'd say right around the end of this run here. There it is. About 342 hours out. And look what ends up happening. We get pretty much dumped on with this cold air by the 4th into the 5th time frame. And we get some really Arctic air starting to develop across the northern plains and maybe starting to work into the central plains. Like I said, given how far out we're looking, a lot of this really beyond next week is definitely hearsay. We'll have to see what ends up happening there. Wouldn't be surprised to see these outcomes given the fact that the polar vortex has been brought back up into the chat, so to speak. But we'll have to see exactly what we could be dealing with. This could uptrend or downtrend as far as the cold temperatures. So we'll have to see what happens. But one thing to note here is that I'm almost certain pretty active times are ahead. So let's now go ahead and take a look at what our precip could look like. And then we'll go ahead and also look at the snowfall totals here, make our comparisons between the models. So we'll start out, of course, with the Euro. Really, like I said, it's a pretty similar look. First real bouts of snow don't really get started until I'd say early Monday morning. Mainly going to be based across the northwest here. There's a small little pocket that tries to develop over here, or a small little clipper system that tries to develop across the northern plains and sneak its way through North Dakota. Maybe the far reaches of the northern Great Lakes could see a little bit of snow. I doubt it will be too much in the way of accumulation. You might get a couple of inches out of it. Not anything super noteworthy there. But this next storm system is pretty robust looking. It's got a pretty strong pressure indicator here, 985 millibars. Pretty strong for an inland cyclone. And we can see that this brings a lot of snow south of the Sierra Nevadas region. And then heading into the Rockies, we could be getting dumped on over here. Then here comes our severe threat on Wednesday. Like I said, this mainly looks like a linear threat, but this quasi-linear convective system, or QLCS, could have tornadoes in it. That's one indicator that I've been seeing, and we will talk about that further tomorrow. Then we see a pretty robust-looking winter storm start to develop here. A lot of very widespread ice potential, too, across the southern portions of Michigan. This could be a big deal for areas like Chicago. Could even become a problem for areas like Buffalo, maybe even Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. We'll be watching areas just off of your coast here for the potential of ice. And then as this goes forward, we watch this one kind of fizzle out, and then the next one starts to develop. We see increasing shower and thunderstorm activity across Kentucky and Tennessee once more in advance of the next storm system. And this has a very interesting shape to it too, might I add. Like, you could see that moisture plume, but that moisture plume eventually makes contact with this cold air here. And right about where Pennsylvania is, you could start seeing snow first, but then eventually shifting over to rain as that warm air starts to advect. Then we see another stream of moisture come in, showers and storms develop out ahead of that, out ahead of the front, and then here comes our main system right in time for the end of the month. Looks really messy, but we could see a line of storms. Hard to say whether there's prefrontal storms, but look how far south that cold air is too. This could turn into a situation for the mid-Atlantic here, where we could see ice and snow. Pretty robust winter storm. So we'll have to watch Pennsylvania, Philadelphia yet again. This is a pretty strong low. This has a little bit of that. I'm trying to remember if Miller A or Miller B nor'easter route is which one it is. If it's Miller A or Miller B nor'easter, but either way, it looks like there is definitely nor'easter. And then we also have this interesting feature here. Whether this holds will be a big contingency factor as to whether areas around New York get snow or not. But with that Clipper system, it could interact with that nor'easter and a bigger snow shield could develop. Totals are still in question with that. And as far as the Canadian is concerned, it's a pretty similar look. The Euro and the Canadian really seem like they're in pretty good agreement with this one. There's that ice storm that we were talking about. We saw our severe threat here. And then as we roll this forward, we see the next system come in here. And it's not quite as well defined. A lot of that cold air ends up outrunning the moisture in this scenario. But we still end up seeing a signal similar to what we were seeing with the Euro. So that's giving me some increase in confidence with that. This is the main discrepancy that I have with this system right here between the Euro and the Canadian model, is the fact that this kind of wobbles a little bit further to the north, and as a result, we end up seeing a bigger snowstorm, but severe weather is a little bit more questionable too. So, like I said, a lot of moving parts with these forecasts. It's going to be tricky to kind of hone in on every little thing. And then, of course, the GFS has a different look in its own right, too. So when we look at that, we start out with the snowstorm over towards the northwest here, especially over towards the Rockies. I think this is definitely leaning towards a Rocky Mountains type system, more so than Sierra Nevada. Still could see some action over there, but I think the most of it is going to be situated across Nevada, across Colorado, and Utah. Here comes our severe weather threat. Pretty well-defined line of storms. And then here's our snow and wintry precipitation shield that's existent across the southern end of the Great Lakes. Bigger snow shield a little bit further back too, though, I noticed with this one as well. And then also, here comes our next system. This looks a lot different than both the Euro and the Canadian models. We see more snow towards the Ohio Valley, and then that moisture lingers, and there's a lot more of it available. So we end up seeing more snow, which now would include areas like New York City, pretty much the entire state of New York, even heading into New Hampshire, Vermont, the Long Island area in general. And then as we continue to roll forward here, we see that increased threat for flooding across parts of the Tennessee Valley into the mid-Atlantic here, maybe even the Ohio Valley. Then here comes our potential severe threat towards the end of the month. It's a little bit quicker a little bit of a faster moving system. This doesn't get a chance to really become a nor'easter, as these two storms don't seem like they interact based off the GFS outcome. And then here comes the part where things get really messy. Big low pressure over here, bringing snow towards the Great Lakes, the northern tiers of the Great Lakes. UP of Michigan looks to get slammed. We have messy system after messy system bringing showers and storms across some of the same areas, so flooding could become a big issue. And we see a new snow belt develop over here with this next system that's going to be working its way across the Ohio Valley, possibly. And there could also be a big ice threat with this too. We have to watch over towards the Tennessee Valley for a severe threat as well. And then here comes that big cool down to end out this model run. So a lot going on there. And do I even dare look at some of the snowfall totals? Don't want to really get anyone too excited given the fact that we're, let's say, looking almost 300 something hours out, but you never know. Sometimes these forecasts will hold true pretty well. So let's go ahead and take a look at that real quick. Oops. So, yeah, when you look at this model, that just shows you how active it is. Oh my goodness. Just looking at this is kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, a lot of activity going on, especially out north to the northwest here. A lot of pockets of 2 to 3 feet of snow all across the board. Even in the valleys, like let's say towards Denver, you could see up to about 5 inches of snow within the next 10 days. Could be locally higher amounts. But look over here towards the northwest, like towards Oregon and Washington on the mountain ranges. 82 inches of snow. That's crazy. But we're, like I said, we're in a very active storm pattern. A lot going on, especially with a little bit of a disruption going on with the polar vortex. That's going to be a wild card heading into March. So when I do that March outlook, I'm just going to warn you in advance. A lot of that is still going to be hearsay because, well, simply put, we don't know what that polar vortex is going to do exactly. We know that it's going to be a factor. That's all we do know at this time. Until things start to materialize further, it's, like I said, just more so hearsay. But across the west, definitely going to be huge big time snowfall totals there. Northern plains look like they're going to be slammed by multiple systems. We could see up to about 2 feet of snow, even in the small pocket over here across South Dakota and parts of Minnesota. A widespread area of about a foot of snow being possible over the next 10 days across the Great Lakes. And even a big pocket of snow is possible over here towards the mid-Atlantic here. Could be some ice mixed in there as well, so we'll have to keep a close eye on that. And then as we look over towards the far northeast, northern New York, into the Adirondacks, big-time snow can be expected here too. Widespread areas of about a foot. Good pocket over here where we could see up to about 2 feet. And then as we start to work our way a little further to the south, the totals start to drop off a little bit. So, like I said, a lot going on here. And this is just based off the Euro. The Canadian is pretty similar in its detail. We can see a large pocket where we could see up to about 2 feet plus in a lot of areas. That snow line does push a little bit further south. We start to see parts of the Ohio Valley getting into the action here. We have Chi-Town getting up to about an inch, maybe a little bit higher amounts locally, depending on how close or how far you are from the lakes, or from the Great Lakes or the Chicago. I can't think of the name right now. But like I said, a lot going on here. This kind of leaves the mid-Atlantic out a little bit more though too. So it's an interesting little dynamic to be had there. Each of the three models had a couple of different looks on some of these snowstorms, so this isn't the most unsurprising thing to see. We're going to see those little discrepancies as we move forward. And then GFS has this a little bit further south, so now we're starting to get more of the Ohio Valley into the action here. We do get a little pocket that tries to develop over here, mainly towards Virginia. This is a little further to the east, but we do get a good bit of action over here towards the Long Island region. We can also see Philly getting into the action here. We could see about a couple inches of snow, maybe even up to 4 inches in some spots. Big time swath of snow still exists along this entire corridor right here between South Dakota and the UP of Michigan and everywhere in between. Northwest has some huge totals. Whoa, 101 inches. Wow, that's wild. And the Sierra Nevada, as much as it didn't look like it was getting a lot of action, it was still getting a good bit though. I mean, you're getting really rich moisture across these regions too. So even if the return doesn't come back great on the models, you can still end up seeing some big time snow here. And this stretches all the way down towards the southern end of it too, so that's pretty impressive. And this is good for this area in a way because these areas have been drought stricken over the years. But to get all this at once is a little bit alarming too. We had a pretty similar atmospheric river episode over, I think it was a good portion of December into January. So hopefully things won't be so bad this time around, but I'm going to be keeping a close eye on you guys as well. Last thing to look at here is more or less the blend of models. And that will pretty much determine will pretty much be the end of the video here. Pretty very telling as to what's going on here. We can clearly see that for the most part, there's a lot of agreement between the models here. That pocket of snow over here towards the mid-Atlantic is going to be a wild card for sure. But other than that, it's pretty good confidence in the fact that we can see some significant snow stretching from the northwest here all the way into the Rockies. Rockies could see pretty impressive snowfall totals here. But also we'll have to watch over towards the desert southwest too, because there's a nice little pocket here where I've been seeing up to about a foot across some of these regions. So a lot to keep track of here for sure. Then there's, interestingly enough, this is a little bit further south than some of the models here, even though there's like trace amounts of snow. This works its way through the Ohio Valley. It works its way even into the mid-Atlantic and starting to flirt with the Appalachians here. So that's going to be interesting to keep track of as well. Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing what ends up happening in that first week of March as a couple other big storm systems were being shown on the GFS. But I better stop before I start really nerding out with this. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, you know what to do. Drop the like, hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. That's where you do the double click there. Of course, share this video to anyone that's trying to get a leg up on the weather for the rest of the month. And of course, feel free to comment. Feel free to say hello and let me know what your thoughts are on the forecast. But yeah, other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This has been Tyler Metalhead Weatherman. I'll see you guys in the morning with the actual March outlook, and then we'll talk about severe weather. So a lot of content coming your way. Hope you guys enjoyed. Till the next video, I'll see you soon. Take care and enjoy your Saturday.